Good morning. Isn't this weather great today compared to the last 4 days? We had what was like 80 or 90 degrees last Thursday and Friday, then into the 60s over the weekend, and at least it's coming back. Hopefully none of you are experiencing any effects from the smoke coming in from Canada. Is everyone okay? Anyone experiencing any side effects from that? Or I don't know if you've seen the news. In the morning, they've been taking photographs of New York and some other major cities, and they've got the haze coming in. So in case you don't know, I'm Senator Michael Moore. So I represent this part of the city. I'm going to say it's nice to be back. It's been a long time. Before COVID, we were always having events here and having chances to see everyone. Since then, obviously it's been limited, but it's nice to see everyone. And I understand we have a lot of new faces, so it's nice to meet you. And thanks for coming. You get a lot of great services here from Suki and everyone here at the Senior Center. So if we can give them a round of applause. We got a couple special things we're going to do this morning. But first, just to let you know, the House and the Senate just finished their budgets. And when the budgets are completed, they go to what's called the conference committee. And that's where you have members of the House and the Senate. They fight it out to try to figure out what we're going to get for what the final funding levels are going to be. But just to let you know, in the Senate budget that we sent to the conference committee, we included $582 million for nursing facilities. So that's a big increase that we've did this year. We also put $12.8 million for elder nutrition meals on wheels. We also funded $26.3 million for grants to local councils of aging. And I think everyone knows that we've got a real housing crisis going on in Massachusetts, in the country, and we included $324 million for emergency assistance family shelters. And then another $195 million for residential assistance for families in transition. That's the RAF program. I think everyone's heard of the RAF program. And that's going to actually provide 750 new vouchers for people to utilize for housing. So that's a big increase. And then another $107 million will go to local housing authorities for additional funding. So those are some of the we actually did a lot in the budget, but those are some of the highlights that I think affect you and your family and most of your friends and the people in this area. So one of the main reasons I'm here is we have two special people. But the first person that I don't think he knows he's getting this recognition is someone from Worcester. He actually went to Dubai to represent us in the Special Olympics. And he's the first one to be recognized and put into the Basketball Hall of Fame. And you see him here all the time working back here in the diner for his efforts and awards in the Special Olympics, in recognizing him for being admitted to the Hall of Fame. I have a Senate citation for Ryan Dixon. Hold on, we get a special friend of Ryan's. Hey.
I'm so proud of Ryan. Yes, we knew each other at Shrewsbury High School way back in the day, and we've been working here together at the Worcester Senior Center with all of you and all of the wonderful people that are here that make Worcester so special. And Ryan, you are a staple to our city, to this center, to our community, and to the world for all that you've done for the Special Olympics and all your achievements. And I'm really grateful to be your friend.
And again, Ryan was the only athlete inducted into the Hall of Fame. The others were all coaches. So again, that's another special achievement. So for you, Ryan, I have from the State Senate, an official citation. Be it known that the Massachusetts Senate hereby extends its congratulations to Ryan Dixon in recognition of the joyous occasion of being inducted into the Massachusetts Special Olympics Hall of Fame. And be it further known that the Massachusetts Senate extends best wishes for continued success, that this citation be duly signed by the President of the Senate and attested to in a copy transmitted by the clerk. It's signed by myself, Senator Moore, but also the Senate President. So congratulations. I think, is Ryan's parents here, family here? Why don't you come up, you want to come up for the photo? Oh, yeah, yep, okay.
Congratulations. I'm impressed.
Hi, buddy. Surprise.
You hold this. Yeah, right here.
I moved too fast.
So Ryan, I don't want to embarrass you, but I heard a nice secret story about you and your father going out and celebrating this occasion in Boston over the weekend. And you never made it into work Monday, I hear. Do you want to say something to everyone?
Yes, thank you all, and love you both.
So another great thing about this job, you get to recognize people that you've known and people that served in these capacities, elected official capacities years before you, that really set the bar and have done a lot that you try to live up to, and you try to achieve the same accomplishments that they have. And we have a special person here today, and I want to make sure I get his bio correct. We have former Mayor John Anderson, first elected to the Worcester City Council in 1975, and he served 11 terms. So how many years is that? 22. So Mayor Joe Petty hasn't reached that yet. Okay, I was just going to say, because I thought the last election he was running and said he's one of the longest serving mayors. So, okay, all right, but I can still joke with him that he hasn't reached that accomplishment yet. Okay. Okay. So served the Worcester City Council in 1975, served for 11 terms, taking a break to become the Worcester mayor in 1986. Through his term as mayor was only a year, John left. Through his term as mayor was only a year, John left an indelible impact on the city of Worcester and its people. He is known for his deep knowledge of the Worcester politics, his incredible knack for building coalitions, which I think if you look today in politics, that knack of building coalitions and working together is something that we really need to get back to. We may not see it a lot. We may not see the problems on the state level, but nationally, I think we can all agree that people need to work together, and we got to stop having these partisan divides. So if people could actually, John, today, that are here in government, locally and nationally, follow your lead there, I think would be a lot better off. But, so it's my pleasure to introduce one of Worcester's finest mayors, John Anderson.
Thank you, Senator. Will you excuse me a minute while I take my jacket off? Just the jacket. It's much more comfortable with the jacket off. You hear that? I'm pointing to somebody who's got their jacket on. But that's okay. One thing I have to do before I leave the jacket there is to get out some notes for myself. I don't know if you saw the story in the paper last year, but the final 2020 census results came out, and Worcester's population was a little over 203,000 people. And the news reports were very much in agreement that that was the highest level in history. The previous high was in 1950, when the population of Worcester was 201,000 people. Well, if Worcester gained just a couple of thousand people between 1950 and 2020, in 70 years that Worcester grew from here to here, you know, that seems to say to me, and to others, I think, that Worcester must be the same, you know, in 2020 as it was in 1950. So I began to think about that. You know, is Worcester the same now as it was in 1950? And you know, in this building alone, we know it's very different. In 1950, this building would have had a group of nuns who were teaching young women to be nurses, to get an RN. Well, I shouldn't say it this way, but there are very few nuns today, anywhere, not just here. And people go and get a BSN, a Bachelor of Science in Nursing degree, and go to a college rather than a nursing school. So that's one change that's very visible here. Also, if you think about it, back in 1950, St. Vincent Hospital was next door, and it was a red brick building with a little cupola on the top. A few years later, they built a great big gray building across the street, which is now being torn down. But now, in 2023, it's a building downtown, which is run by an out-of-city corporation. It's a very different world, right? So I began to think more about difference. And I thought, well, I'm going to ask myself some questions and see how Worcester changed. In 1950, Worcester was described, and this is not a slogan, as the largest manufacturing city not on a navigable waterway. It's even hard to say, let alone put on a bumper sticker. What it said about Worcester was that it was a big manufacturing city, a big manufacturing city. And I thought more about that. And I began to, in my mind, to run through the city. And I started at the West Boylston border and then began to work my way through Worcester. In Greendale, at that point in time, there was a company called Pullman Standard, which some of you may remember. It was on West Mountain Street and then partly on Brook Street. They made trolley cars, railroad cars, and other railroad equipment. That company today is long gone, as are trolley cars, railroad cars, and so on. What's there today? A supermarket. And what was there not too long ago was a movie theater, a multiplex, in fact. So I kept my mind moving further down. So I had, when you leave Pullman Standard, you come to a lot of industrial buildings on New Bond Street, right? Heald Machine Company was there in 1950, a big company, locally owned and impressive. Next to it was a company called Wickwire Spencer, which made wires and other metal products. Are they there now? No, no. What's there today in the Wickwire Spencer building is a school, the Abby Kelly Foster Charter School. And in the Heald building, some small offices. Now, across the street was Norton, and they are still there. But the interesting thing about Norton, in those days, the people who ran it and the people who owned it were the same people, and they lived in Worcester. You could see them on the street. You could go and talk to them. Today, Norton Company is still there, but it's owned by a French company called Saint-Gobain. And if you want to talk to top management, you've got to fly 3,000 miles and practice your French. Eh bien, j'ai un something or other. So it's the same but different. If you keep going down West Boylston Street and you look on your left, you're going to see the Worcester Press Steel Company in 1950. Is that there? No, that's gone. Some of the shops are now a tire dealer, offices, and just up the street is a nursing home, right? No steel, just care. If you keep going down from there, you get down to the area around Lincoln Square. And just north of Lincoln Square was the United States Envelope Company. Big buildings, 5 floors, at the corner of Faraday Street and Grove Street. And across the street from that was the Northworks, still a part of U.S. Steel at that point. Are they there? No. The Northworks buildings are there, but the name now is associated with a restaurant, not with a steel company. And across the street, where the Envelope Company had been, what's there? A dorm for WPI, a big dorm for WPI. Go a little further down, and you get to Lincoln Square. What was there is Morgan Construction Company. That's still there. But who owns Morgan Construction Company? A company called Siemens. And Siemens headquarters are in Germany, right? So if you want to go and talk to the Siemens management ownership, du müssen Deutsch sprechen, right? That kind of thing. Go a little further down, and you get to Wyman Gordon Company on Madison Street. Were they there? Where are they now? What's left of them is maybe a bit in Grafton and a few other places. But what's at that site on Madison Street? Polar Park and a lot of parking lots, right? Go a little further south, go down to Quincy Village, and what was there? Another U.S. Steel operation, right? What's there today? Walmart, right? It's amazing. It's amazing when you say, oh, the population is the same, the city must be the same. It's just the same kind of place. But when you begin to look at it and ask questions like, well, where do people work? Or how's the economy doing things? You find yourself seeing change, significant change in those areas. Think about, I have to take a little water right now, because I don't know about you, but if Canadian Air or whatever it is drying my nose, except that mostly it dries it by dripping, and then my throat gets dry. But think about Worcester in a different way. What was the big day of the week in 1950? Wednesday night. Wednesday night. That was so exciting because you could go downtown and shop. You could go to stores that, you know, had little sales, and people took the bus downtown, or they drove downtown and found a parking space on Main Street, probably. So you could park, let's say we park right near Central Street on Main Street, and we're going to look around downtown. First thing you see on the left is the Plymouth Theater, a really exciting place. I mean, Worcester, you know, you could see movies, you know, first-run movies there. And if you thought about it, that was not your only choice. You could go to the Plymouth, or you could walk a little further up to Elm Street, and you could go to Lowe's Poway, Elm Street. Or if you had a certain kind of taste, you could go to Pleasant Street and go to the Olympia, which was an old building, but still in business. Or you could look down Front Street and see the Warner Theater down there. And then across the Common, you could see the Capitol Theater on Franklin Street. Or you could go around up Federal Street, turn to your left, and see the real Lowe's Poway that a lot of people called the Palace, because it looked like a palace when you got in there, with plush seats and gilt trim everywhere, marble restrooms, all that kind of stuff. Well, if you didn't have much money and you needed to save a few pennies and still go to the movies, you could go further down on Front Street to the Family Theater, right? Which is also where high school kids used to go in the afternoon if they didn't want to go to their chemistry class or their French class or their math class or whatever. And if you had even fewer pennies, you could go a little further up Main Street and go to the Royal Theater. And if you had a certain foreign language skill, you could go back to Elm Street to a theater called the Regent, which was a very small little theater where my grandmother took me to see a movie in Swedish when I was 12 years old. Not exactly the best thing to do with a 12-year-old boy. But anyway, and if you didn't want to go downtown, you could actually go to the Park Theater at Webster Square, or the Greendale Theater out in Greendale, neither one of which exists. No theater exists in Worcester today. 0 theaters. That's amazing. There were 11 movie theaters in Worcester in 1950, and in 2023, 0. That's amazing. Well, if you didn't want to go to the movies, you could do other things downtown. And the favorite thing was to shop, I think, because people after World War II had a little bit more money than they had had before, and they had gotten married, and they always needed something, new curtains, new clothes, one of those newfangled things called television, right? You could get that in 1950 in downtown Worcester. Well, where could you go? Well, you could go to Barnard's. Barnard's, Sumner and Putnam Company, which was on Main Street, right near Mechanics Hall, which at that point featured wrestling and roller skating. But if you didn't like Barnard's, what they had to offer, you walked a little further up to Front Street and went to Scherer's, C.T. Scherer and Company, at the corner of Front and Commercial Street. And if that wasn't to your liking, you walked past City Hall, and across the street was John C. McInnes Company, right? John C. McInnes, like a lot of merchants, was a Scottish immigrant who had started a store and done very well. The thing about McInnes's was that it really was 3 or 4 little buildings attached to one another. So sometimes within a given floor, there were 2 or 3 stairs you had to go up to get from house goods into domestics or something like that. Next to them, of course, was the really big store, which called itself the Boston Store, Denholm's, Denholm and McKay Company. Calling itself the Boston Store was meant to send you the message that you didn't have to go to Boston to get Boston Store quality. You could do it at Denholm and McKay. And if you didn't find things there that you wanted, you could, and especially clothes, you could go across the street and walk a little bit to Filene's, right? And if you were a pinch penny, you could go to Filene's basement, which was, some of it was downstairs, but most of it was next door in a separate building on the street. So how many department stores in Worcester today? The same 0, right? It's amazing. There are places like Target, right, and Walmart, which are kind of department stores, but they're not the kind of department store that you found in 1950s downtown Worcester. It's amazing. It's amazing. Well, let's say you finished your shopping. What are you going to do? If you were, just in for a little snack, you went to a place called Easton's, which was at the corner of Pleasant and Main Street. And you could get in the little back room, which was like a tea room, I guess. You could get some pastries or maybe even a sandwich or things like that. Or if you wanted to go up a little bit, you would get a little bit more food, you could go to the Waldorf cafeteria, which had this amazing way of paying for things. You went in the front door and you got a little ticket, right? And then you punched it and you picked things out of a glass door, and then you sat. It was kind of fun. It was self-service with fun, right? And relatively inexpensive. But if you want to move up a little bit from, well, I'm going to knock this thing over, so I think that's the best thing to do with it. If you wanted to really treat yourself, you went back to Mechanic Street, and about halfway down Mechanic Street, there was Putnam and the Thurstons, or Putts, as everyone called it, right? It was a wonderful restaurant, right? And you could get a full course dinner at a reasonable price with very good service. If you wanted a different kind of atmosphere, on Franklin Street, you had two choices there. You could go to the Bancroft Hotel, right? Or a little further down the street to the Coronado Hotel, which was, I think, at that point, doing a fairly good business. So, all of those things were there. None of those things are there. So, if you think Worcester hasn't changed, you don't have to think too much about it. Lots have changed in that area. What has brought about that change? Lots of things, lots of reasons there's been change. One is the way I got here today, and that is I drove here, right? And the car began to change things very quickly, very quickly. Shopping centers began to develop. First, in this area in Framingham. And you could go to a real Boston store, Jordan Marsh, in Framingham. You could drive there, and they had lots of free parking, right? And you could go and shop there. The car also made it possible to do all kinds of activities that you perhaps couldn't find in Worcester. A favorite activity in Worcester in 1950 would have been bowling, right? Candlepin bowling, right? How many bowling alleys are in Worcester right now? Right. Where could you go to bowl now? You could drive to Shrewsbury, right? But the car then is a major factor in changing. It opened a world for people. It really, before that, say in 1950, you were often limited to where you could go by what transportation was available. And that meant buses or trains, things like that. After 1950, increasingly, you could go wherever your car would take you. And that is a big, big change. In today's world, how do you shop? Online. I'm glad you said that, because that tells you what another big reason for change is. And the big reason is technology. In 1950, people in Worcester had 5-digit phone numbers, 42079, right? And you dialed it on a rotary dial, right? If you ask anyone under 20 today what a rotary dial is, they look at you as though you are a dinosaur, which I probably am. But regardless of that, technology has meant an enormous change. In 1950, if your sister or your cousin lived in Louisville, Kentucky, right? And you wanted to talk to her, you called operator and asked for long distance, and you got a voice, a human voice, that said, where would you like to call? And you said, I want to call Louisville, Kentucky, 401613. And they would say, I am placing the call. And then if your hearing was good, you could hear operator Worcester calling operator Poughkeepsie, New York. Poughkeepsie, New York operator calling Columbus, Ohio. Calls literally were transferred, right, from one operator to another, to another, to another. And that was the way long distance worked. Today, if I want to call somebody in Brazzaville in Africa, I just dial 1-603 or whatever, the code is. It's amazing. It's amazing. Technology has made an enormous difference in how we do things. And one thing that hasn't changed, these cups are very fragile. Anyway, and they're not very big. So Worcester has changed considerably. The census may say there are the same number of people here as there were in 1950, approximately. But those people live in a different world. In 1950, if somebody said, Worcester took that word and the words small world and tried to put them in the sentence, they would say, people in Worcester have a small world. And what they meant was you lived in a city and most of your activity took place in that city. You went to school there, you worked there, you married there, you raised your family there, and occasionally you went to a Red Sox game maybe, or very occasionally you went to Florida, in a winter, something like that. In 2023, if you try to put Worcester and the word small world together, what you end up saying is, for Worcester, oh, thank you, Suki. Suki to the rescue. The applause is well deserved. Put those words together in 2023, Worcester and small world. What you would say now is Worcester's in a small world because every place is reachable by phone or in person. It's extraordinary when you think of it. And people today have been to the moon. When I was a kid, going to the moon was science fiction, fantasy, unbelievable. There was a company on Franklin Street, David Clark Company, that makes the suits that people wear to be on the moon. So that is a connection of Worcester to what now is a very, very small world. If you and I could charter a plane, all of us, right? We could leave here now and be in Paris tonight, right? And I'd take you all out to a wonderful dinner somewhere. Fortunately, I know we're not going to charter the plane. But, so it's, I suppose in a lot of ways, the point of a lot of this is sometimes things seem the same or look the same, but they're not. Change has taken place. I feel the same as I did when I was 14, but somehow I know that things are not the same. right? That's a new hip, right? That's new arteries and the rest of it. What I need, of course, is some new hair. Well, I think as we look around us in Worcester, it's important to look at what the change has been and think about what it's meant for us. And I think the other point that I would stress is that a lot of the change I've talked about really is kind of surface. Because under all of that, you and I were here in 1950, right? Some of us, anyway. I'll speak only for myself. And we're still here. And there are different people here. But we're all working together to make this a better place. Sometimes making it a better place turned out well, and sometimes it didn't turn out so well. But I think overall, the reason Worcester has not just as many people as it had in 1950, but has a few more, is because Worcester is still a good place, a great place to come to and to plant yourself. Thank you. I have to tell you, I feel like a little kid who's been handed a cup with a handle because he couldn't handle the handle. How's that? Yes, are there any questions? You want the mic?
John,
Are you good? No.
talking about change, something that's coming down and it's real quick. And it could be frightening. It's artificial intelligence. It's in my wife's phone. And what I see happening is very concerning.
I agree with you. I find it not on my phone so much, but in my computer, which when I try to look up something, it will tell me that it can offer me help if I would clarify what I want to know. And I don't, I worry about that because of two things. One is it's reading what you're thinking or doing. And secondly, because it is putting itself in your place and somehow seems to be saying, you should do this. You know, and that is a worry.
Very worrying.
I understand sometimes, you know, that you can, and I think this happens today, that people can type in 500 symptoms of something and get back a series of answers, you know, what might cause them. That's one thing. That's just providing information. But the other, where it's active, you know, and in effect telling you what to do, that is worrisome.
Or even taking your place.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, the fact you turn on your computer, you are doing something. The artificial intelligence knows who's doing something, and presumably, I shouldn't say presumably. It's possible that it can then adopt you, so to speak, and do things. You know?
It's a big thing.
It is a big thing. It's a worrying thing.
So worrying.
It's dehumanizing the world. You know, I mean, humans, for all their failings, you know, still are the key to today's world and the future. I agree with you.
That's big change.
Yes, very big. Anyone else? Anyone have a dear memory of some store I forgot? I can understand, you know, and this is true of all of us, you know, we can turn on our TV, and if we get certain services, I can see whatever movie I want. I don't have to go, right? Except for a new movie, probably. I think it's unfortunate. I think movies are designed for an audience, not of one, but of more than one, right? That you should be in a theater with other people because you hear them laugh, or you hear them cry, or you hear them gasp, you know, and that's important because the people who made the movie are thinking of that. You know, I'm going to make the scariest movie in the world, right? And the scariest movie in the world is going to lead to, oh, you know, that kind of reaction. And if you're sitting alone, you know, you can do that, but that doesn't do much. In a theater, you know, you're sharing somehow, you know, and it's unfortunate. I think beyond that, I'm not quite sure, you know, when you think of it, think back to what I was saying. 11 movie theaters, right? 11. Maybe each of them had 500 people in them at the same time. That's 5,500 people watching movies. And today, the big zero. It's as though we're all isolated from one another. I think one of the most important things that the Senior Center does is to bring people together. And other things that bring people together are ball games, which are important. It used to be church. I'm not quite sure that's as true as it used to be. But it's important to be with one another, to talk about things, you know, to come to understand, you know, what's going on in the world. And movies, in their own way, were part of that. Yes.
Can we go back to Main Street? Because
Yes.
you got me down there on a Wednesday night,
Yes.
and right down from Barnard's, my dad had a business called Mechanics Rubber Company.
Oh, yes.
And we used
Had
to...
a fancy tile front, did it?
It had a front that said Mechanics Rubber Company, and he did business. He had a commercial business with all those big companies. And then he had a retail where he sold sneakers and rubber goods, and for men, they were rubbers and galoshes and all those good things. So you took me right back to Main Street when I went walking along on a Wednesday night. And he finally retired in 1975. So
That's, yeah, and I'm glad you raised that because Main Street, between all of these department stores, was filled with small businesses. The Owl Shop, which went out of business fairly recently, was one of them. There were small bank branches. All the banks, talk about change. The banks that existed in Worcester in 1950, 51, 52 were things like the Worcester County Trust Company, the Worcester Institution for Savings, the People's Savings Bank, the Mechanics Savings Bank,
And the National Mechanics
National Bank. the Home Cooperative Bank, Worcester Federal Savings, People's Bank, the Bay State Bank. There were 11 banks in Worcester, 11, all based in Worcester. When you went in to ask for a mortgage, you talked to somebody who could make the decision. And if you had to refer it to somebody, it was the guy next door or the guy upstairs. How many locally owned banks are there in Worcester today? There had been 11. Today there is one. One. Bay State. Bay State on Franklin Street. What had been a local bank is now part of Santander, right? Santander. That's based in Madrid, right? TD Bank is based in Toronto, right? It's amazing. One of the significant aspects of this change that I've been talking about is that it used to be that the people who owned and ran the local business, the local bank, lived here. You could actually, if you worked at Norton Company, then you could probably talk to the president, who also lived in Worcester, right? First on Metcalf Street, and then later on Drury Lane. If you worked at Crompton and Knowles, you could talk to the people who ran it, who lived in Worcester. And at one point, they lived across the street here. If you worked for other companies, the same thing was true. Now, the ownership is corporate and distant, very distant. And that's meant, you know, I said a few minutes ago that Worcester was a small world. Well, that was part of it. Everybody was in the same world, right? The owners of the company, the managers of the company, and you and I lived in the same city. Now, you're lucky if they live on the same continent. You know, which is, it's a fact. There were also men's stores, equal treatment, right? Equal treatment. There was Ware Pratt, right, at the corner of Main and Pearl Street. And then diagonally across the street was Kennedy's. In the Anderson family, for some reason, my cousins, they're all males, my cousins shopped at, or their parents shopped at Ware Pratt, and my family shopped at Kennedy's. God knows why. But in those days, loyalty to a store was a big factor. And the clerk who helped you often knew you. And just take those 3 words I said, the clerk who helped you, it's 5 words. Think of it. Who helps you now when you go to the store? Right? There were times when you would go into a store, a department store, let's take Denholm's, for example, and if I was trying to buy a present for my mother, for example, I would go into the women's department and I would say, I would find some person, clerk, and I would say, I'm trying to find a Mother's Day present for my mother. Oh, let me help you. Let me help you. Let me see what I can find for you. Let me do this. Let me do that. Today, often enough, you go in, and if you ask somebody, they say, I don't know. I think it's a missed opportunity for a lot of businesses that they're looking at perhaps a bottom line, saying we can save 2 cents by doing this rather than saying to themselves, gee, if we get people to keep coming back here, we'll make $2. You know, because loyalty pays off. And it's, I mean, I am a great believer in it. And you're right. All of us go into stores nowadays where you notice that where somebody used to help you do something, they don't anymore. Like you, I worked in a grocery store when I was a kid. And one of the first things I learned was how to pack a bag. Right? Pack a bag. Nowadays, the way to pack a bag apparently is, you know, so, and that's a matter of service that produces loyalty. And it's still true in the automobile industry often, that if somebody sells you a car and it really turns out well, you know, it's reasonable, it's dependable, you know, it serves you well, you are going back to the person who sold you that and say, hey, Fred, you know, the last car you sold, and that was really good. You know, I'm in the market again. And I think that is an important aspect of business that's neglected sometimes. Well, Worcester Center is I'm trying to think of the nicest word. It's a kind of lost vision. It was an effort to produce a shopping center, right, like Shoppers World that had succeeded, in a downtown area. The difficulty was, and I go back to the words I used about Shoppers World. Shoppers World had Boston stores with free parking. Worcester Center, you had to pay to park, and that was a killer. You had to park in a garage, not in an open lot. That made a difference. The stores were there. Jordan Marsh was there, and others that you know, were well known. But I think people saw that to get into those nice stores, you had to pay to park. That was a big, big problem. And you remember what happened. The stores shrank in the beginning. Then some of them, you know, were vacant. If you notice, though, since then, a lot of traditional shopping centers have empty stores. If you go to Auburn, Sears closed, right? And that's true out in Northborough, wherever that one is. I think what somebody mentioned early, online shopping is going to undo a lot of traditional stores. You can sit at home, right, and turn your computer on, and you can shop at 50 stores online. And some of them will send you the material free of charge, you know, no freight cost. Do you know what it's going to be? It's going to be Amazon. Amazon is building a warehouse to get the products you buy online to you faster. That's what it's going to be. It's amazing. But, you know, next to the old Greendale Mall is an industrial building that is now Reliant Medical. And it used to be a wallpaper factory called Prager.
I was going back to restaurants on Main Street, but the central kitchen.
Yes, the central kitchen.
It was
I
so
don't think
good.
men
You
went
could
into
go
that
every
much,
night,
but
the central kitchen, they were so attentive when you went in there to eat and made sure your cinnamon rolls, there was a roll that you got with dinner, and food was so good in there. And always a line waiting to get in there.
yeah. You still find lines, but,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
you don't
but
get the
not-
choice.
but not
and
there,
you
no.
you don't get the
No.
cinnamon roll either.
No, and
Yeah.
that, but you don't find food that's made almost like personally for you.
One more.
Anyone? Oh, way in the back.
I'm going back to the stores on Main Street, and I've talked with other people here in the past about these stores. Grant's, Woolworth, Kresge's, further down, Mart.
JJ Newbury.
Right, all those stores that we remember going into to get all our needs and get a little treat in there.
I'm glad you
Sitting at
meant-
the counter at all those stores that had, you know, the little restaurant in them.
I'm glad you mentioned Grant's because that's a good example of what happened. Grant's was first a kind of ordinary store. Then it built a new store at the corner of Main and Mechanic Street. And then when downtown began to dry up, it built a store on Grafton Street. Do you remember in
Yeah.
what the little plaza up there? But they couldn't quite swing it, and they went out of business. And then it became a discount store, and then it became I shouldn't say this, but a even discounted discount store. But, and you know, it's a good example of things. If we put our minds to it, we could probably come up with 100 stores that used to exist on Main Street. One of them went out of business just a couple of years ago. Elwood Adams,
Right, yes.
the hardware store, had been in business 200 years, went out of business. And part of the reason it went out of business is because where Sawyer's had a lumber yard on Gold Star Boulevard is now a much bigger hardware store. Yes, sir. Ma'am. Seed the Taylor, he was up near the courthouse, and I presume he tailored clothes. I know with the store, I think you've just told people about an opportunity for starting a new business. That's, you know, and I mean that seriously. If there was somebody who would pick up things to clean and bring them back, that would attract customers, I think. He was before his time, way before his time. Maybe someday we should literally take a walk up Main Street and see what's there.
You think it'll ever come back to life like it was in the 50s?
No. You remember, part of downtown was office buildings, and your lawyer might be there, your dentist might be there, your doctor. There was even a building called the Medical Arts Building on Pleasant Street, across from the Olympia. People went downtown to do all kinds of things. Your accountant was down there. If you go to look at office buildings in downtown Worcester, the Park Building is residential, pretty much. The Central Building is becoming residential. If there's new construction, it's probably residential. I think what's going to happen is that downtown will become a residential neighborhood with some services, and the government will still be there. We have an interesting world to look forward to, right? To watch for change. We talked about slogans. I talked about slogans before. Right now, the slogan that people in the city use is that Worcester is a city of eds and meds, right? With the largest employer in the city of Worcester is the UMass Medical Center, by far. 16,000 people probably. And among the top 10 employers are two colleges. So I think, now Becker failed, went out of business, but I think the educational institutions will stay, although education's changing quite a bit. So they've got to engage in some form of cost control, cost containment. That's part of the issue. But at the same time, increasingly colleges compete with one another. So if College A has an Olympic swimming pool and students see that and College B doesn't have one, they're going to tell College B, I'm going to College A because it's got an Olympic pool. So College B is going to build a pool, which is going to cost them $3 million. So where are they getting the $3 million? It's an issue that I'm sure every college president is thinking about, or I hope they are. You're not latecomers to the talk. You're early comers to dinner or lunch. Oh. But I think, I take it as a sign that I think I'm finished. Now, I should toss the baton. And if somebody catch it, they can have it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. This is terrific. Another round of applause for John Anderson, former mayor of Worcester.